Mike Jr. I'm the president of the Lexington Historical Society. I wanted to thank all of you from coming today. Of course, the entire Fenn family. We have two members of our select board I want to recognize, Doug Lucenti and Susie Barry. The landscaper designer Holly, whose design you see over here on the sideboard, and of course all his friends and family. Dan, of course, was many things to many people. Harvard educator, member of John F. Kennedy's staff, the first curator of the Kennedy Museum in Boston. But mostly he was everything Lexington. He loved this town. And he was involved in just about everything that you can think about with this town. Past president of the Lexington Historical Society. I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. And a member of the Lexington Minutemen, and involved in too many activities in terms of the town to speak of. From town meeting to liaison to the society as a select board member. He was involved in pretty much everything. I do want to relay one story that is near and dear to my heart, and it kind of tells a little bit of a story about what Dan was like. A few years ago, the Minutemen had a trip down to Washington, D.C. to rededicate the memorial to the revolutionary heroes of Lexington that we had planted in Arlington National Cemetery. So we went back for the rededication. Dan was with us. And unbeknownst to me, Dan kind of pulled me aside and said, you know, this is the first time I've been to Kennedy's grave since he was interned here. We laid a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. We laid a wreath at Taft's Museum, which many of you know we were the honor guard for Taft when he had his summer home here in Massachusetts. And we laid a wreath at the tomb of John F. Kennedy. Dan was front and center, practically tears in his eyes. It was just a fantastic experience. And you know, Dan was well known to this day with the White House. Tom will remember this. We went to the White House, and all of a sudden they found out that Dan Fenn was with us at the White House tour. Well, Dan got shoveled off and had a nice special private tour of all of the residences of the White House. And of course, he'll remember a lot of those. Tom still remembers the Oval Office, I think, when he was a little kid with John. No, okay, somebody. Anyways,
that's a good rumor.
Okay, all right. But together with many other organizations in town, we've established this memorial bench to Dan. I also want to make everybody aware that the community center has a special kiosk and room dedicated to Dan Fenn, a very user-friendly computer where you can access all of the interviews that he's done over the years and the interviews that were done about him. At this time, I'd like to thank all of the committee members. From the Historical Society, Mary Keenan, Susan Rockwell, and George Gamoda. From the Community Center, Christine Dean. From LexMedia, Terry Samaras. From the Society again, Ann Lee, who, along with Holly, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, Holly, Samuels, there's a design, what we're going to eventually see as the Dan Fenn Memorial Garden here. And it's going to take care of this ugly patch of grass and make it look really beautiful. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce, who's going to provide the scissors and the ribbon for us to cut. I already thanked the town, Doug and Susie, and the HDC for approving this project. Kim Katzenbach, the clerk, who I worked with very closely in getting the bench, and Chris Filodaro, who was able to place the bench from DPW. And lastly, of course, Dan's ultimate legacy, all the Fenn family, Ann, Peter, Dave, Tom, Greg, Marie, and Chris. So at this time, I would like to introduce Tom Fenn to say a few words, after which I will invite up Carol, our director, Carol Wood, our new director, to cut the ribbon.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Oh, I'll take that. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. Oh, man. I don't mean to be rude by wearing this horrible mask, greeting everyone and not shaking hands. I've got a little bronchitis, and I don't want this event to be a super spreader event. That probably wouldn't be a good idea. My dad would definitely love this garden, and I think he would like to be here because he loved to party and he also loved to eat. So after the service, there will be food and everything. Don't forget the community center where they do have the kiosk, and my sister set up a really nice display. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you this afternoon. Thanks, folks.
I've had some bad experiences with these when I was with the chamber. They don't cut that well.
I got these little
Bear
minis.
with me.
I
We
got
have a
these little
backup.
minis.
It just doesn't work. Okay, ready?
Hey! Beautiful.
I'm going to do that. I'll see you all there.
And welcome. My name is Rev Ann Mason, and I welcome you to our sacred outdoor setting at First Parish. We are here today to celebrate the life of Dan Huntington Fenn Jr. It is fitting that today we gather on the edge of the Lexington battle green to honor a man of stature, a patriot, a servant leader, a wise counselor and teacher, and a loving father, grandfather, and friend. We gather today as a community recognizing a man who many of us remember so well. We come from the diversity of our lives in the midst of the world in which we live with the noises that are part of that. It is a joy to be together in this place. We come from the diversity of our lives as family members, church members, town meeting members, and the Harvard community. We come as admirers and students of a man who has influenced us all. I count myself as one of you, for Dan was a beloved member of First Parish for many years, and I am grateful that he was such a strong supporter of my ministry here. Dan was on the search committee which brought me here, and I know that I would not have been considered had I not passed muster with him. I treasure the memory of our long talks over Thai coconut soup, and I am a better minister because of his wise counsel as leader of this congregation. This is a moment to remember again the wise and the good who have blessed our lives. This is a time to be grateful for those who seek for equality and justice for all, to be thankful for men who labor for a world in which every person may reach their highest good. This is a day to know again that when a man of stature enters our midst, life has given more than death can take away. Dan Fenn was such a man of stature, and it is right to celebrate his life, a life of love, a generous life of service, a life remarkable for his accomplishments, and for his unwavering respect and encouragement of all those he met. But in the midst of celebration, let us take time to mourn as well. For the loss that we feel hangs heavy on our hearts. This moment and this place are made sacred by your presence and by our need to remember one so beloved who has left our midst. We come together that we may honor Dan in our hearts and hold him dear in our memory. We gather to share our memories, our sorrow, and our laughter. We gather to offer our thanksgiving for the life of Dan Fenn and to notice how we have been transformed by knowing him. Will you join with me as we invite the God of love to be with us in this hour? Loving and gracious Spirit of life, we invite your presence into this gathered company of mourners. Bless us all with your tender compassion, that we may face our grief with courage, so that our bruised and tender hearts might begin to heal. Help us to be transformed by the tribute shared today, so that together we may honor the memory of such a remarkable and beloved man. Fill us with gratitude for a life well lived, even as we mourn the loss of his presence. And help us all to consider how we might continue the legacy he leaves behind, as the truths for which he fought shine as brightly now as they ever have, and are as desperately needed. Amen. And now I invite the grandchildren to come forward to light our Paul Revere lanterns.
The flame of our faith carries us from one generation to another. This chalice represents the patriot of olden days, Paul Revere.
The flame within is shining today for our grandfather, a modern patriot. May this flame ignite in us a sense of service and dedication to that which we hold dear, our family, our country, our faith, and our world.
Thank you. Will you please join as we read together the 23rd Psalm? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me, in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And now I'd like to invite our Minister Emerita, the Rev Helen Cohen, to come forward.
Stay close to the mic. Thank you. Thank you, Ann. It's been a year since Dan Fenn died. Hard to believe, because he's still alive in our minds and hearts, in the minds and hearts of his beloved family, of his fellow members of First Parish in Lexington, and of so many in the town and in the country and in the world. Let us here support one another in grieving his death, rejoicing in his life, and holding him in our memories. And Ann, I want to thank you and First Parish so much for continuing to minister to him. There you are. Okay. And to his family in these last years. Thank you. My first connection to Dan was not with Dan himself. It was hearing my father talk about a fifth-generation Unitarian minister who had just spoken to the Laymen's League at our church, the First Unitarian Congregational Church of Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1955. Dad expressed his admiration of the speaker in a poem. "This is the hand that shook the hand of Dan Huntington Fenn. I shook it once, I shook it twice, and I'd like to shake it again." Little did I know, when I was called to be minister at First Parish in Lexington in 1980, that I was soon to meet the son of that Dan Huntington Fenn, whose name had been echoing in my mind for 25 years. My first actual contact with our Dan Huntington Fenn, who wasn't regularly attending church at the time, I have to say, was a letter he wrote to me that first year, in which he gently but firmly informed me about a ministerial regulation that this fresh new minister didn't know about and therefore was in danger of breaching. That was pretty scary. The next contact came shortly thereafter. He invited my husband Don and me over for supper. By then, I at least knew who he was. Staff assistant to President John Kennedy, the creative founding director of the JFK Library, and a long and outstanding citizen of Lexington. I probably sat on the edge of my chair that entire evening at the house. But during that evening, I learned a lot about Dan. His interest in and concern for the community, for the church, and for the minister. His warm hospitality. His openness to connection with people, even when he had a concern about them. His humor. His commitment to justice and equality, the founding vision of the United States. Over time, I learned much more. I learned that Dan was devoted to his family. I saw the way he cared for his mother, Anna, until she died at the age of 99. I saw his love for his parents, his siblings, his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, as he followed all their lives with interest and guidance and support. And I saw his family's devotion to him in return. I learned that Dan was a lot of fun, that he loved and participated in theater, whether it was his Shakespeare reading group in Cambridge or regaling us by the fire in Parker Hall with the annual reading of A Christmas Carol. He loved hats and ties. He loved restaurants. He had deep friendships, some of which he carried on with what was to me an amazingly vigorous verbal jousting. I don't know how many of you have observed that, but it was wild. He provided lively, anecdotal, informative tours of the JFK Library that he auctioned off every year at the church. It was wonderful. He loved and nurtured our historical memory, so important to this church, which is over there. This is not actually the church, but the church is over there, and this town. In 2017, he played a vital role in planning and carrying out the church's 325th birthday celebration, with bell ringing and marching. Lou Counts and the History Committee organized an historical exhibit in the parish hall. My husband Don wrote an historical drama performed by First Parish members and music director Rev Jackson. Dan arranged for an evening visit from George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. And it was great. And he worked with Chris Bateman, owner of Lex Restaurant, who prepared a grand colonial feast We all had fun. But most of all, over the years, I learned about the wide-ranging qualities of character that made Dan a teacher, a leader, an inspiration, a reconciler, a creative thinker, a pillar of insight and wisdom and hope for so many, and certainly for me. He was not a saint, nor would he have enjoyed being one. He was a man with deep commitments and strong opinions, but a man who could listen and learn all his life. He gave nearly annual sermons in his later years, and I watched how hard he worked on them, researching, discussing with others the issues involved, writing with elegance, clarity, and humility, always eager to ask questions, to deepen his understanding of life, and to sharing that understanding with all of us. Dan and I often talked about Erasmus, the great Dutch scholar, known and admired throughout Europe at the time of the Protestant Reformation, who worked so hard to reconcile the bitterly feuding parties, hoping to prevent the devastating religious wars that ravaged the continent for more than a century afterward. Dan was my Erasmus, watching humans in all our folly and inhumanity, but loving us nonetheless, finding hope for us, which we could pass on to others. He grieved for us. He laughed with us and wept with us. And when we lamented the state of the nation in recent years, he told us about the troubled state of the nation in his youth and young adulthood. And that was powerful stuff. Dan Fenn worked all his life for us and always gave us hope. Whatever was going on in the world, nevertheless, he persisted. Thank you, Dan. You will always be part of us.
Now, will you please rise as you are able and join in singing our hymn, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Hello, I'm not John Fenn. John Fenn is my dad. I'm Lee Fenn. My father sadly couldn't be here today to tell this story of the Fenn kids, which of course are Danny, John, and Helena. So the Fenn kids got together in New York City some time ago. I would say probably in the 1600s, but it was really in around the 1960s. And they all went out to a Chinese restaurant. And they didn't go to the Chinese restaurants that I go to now, where I go in and say, here's $3, can I have some food? Thank you. And then I'm done. No, they went to a fancy Chinese restaurant, a luxurious Chinese restaurant with different options and all kinds of incredible food. And they had a wonderful time. All of their spouses were there, which were Nancy, Farrell, and my mother, Ann. And they're having this marvelous meal. And then it came time to pay. Now, normally there'd be that wrestling match over the check, but there wasn't, because they're all the kids, right? So everyone took out their money and made a pile and realized, oh my gosh, we're short. Not a little short. We are short, like very. So Dan said, look, I'll take your cash and I'll just write a check. Yes, there was a time before debit cards, no credit cards, nothing like that. So he takes out his checkbook. And the waiter sees the checkbook and says, I'm sorry, cash only. Now everyone's confused because they don't want to do dishes. They don't want to stick around forever and try and earn some money. They have to cover the bill. So Dan said, after a good pause, let me try this. And he took out his wallet and he showed him the White House pass that had his picture on it. And the Chinese restaurateur looked at him and said, well, if we can't trust you, who can we trust? The world has changed a little bit. But that was one of my father's favorite stories about his brother Dan. We will miss him.
I don't know why they didn't have enough cash, Lee, but that always was one of my father's favorite stories too. He didn't use his stature to not pay bills, however, at least that we all know. I'm Peter Fenn, the oldest Fenn child by a little bit, maybe a little more than a little bit. And I just, first of all, want to thank Ann Mason and also Helen Cohen for all the time and all that they have done to make this celebration possible over these many months. They were so close to our dad, as you heard from Helen and from Ann. I also want to thank my siblings. For all their love and their devotion to our dad and all they have done to celebrate the day here today. Remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And thanks to all of you for coming. He meant so much to you, I know, but you meant so very much to him. A number of years ago, I came up from Washington to do a session with my dad at Cary Hall. What were we talking about? Campaigns and politics. What a shock. And I said at that time when I introduced them that I felt like somebody bringing a few grains of sand to a beach. Well, what could I add? Especially in the town of Lexington, that he loved so much and to which he gave so much over his lifetime. There are many reasons, as Helen and Ann and as my siblings will attest, why we all appreciated him and loved him so much. A great public servant, a great teacher, a great community leader, a man who cherished his friends and his family. But there is one particular aspect to our father that I want to touch on today. He was a true optimist, always believing that where there was conflict, there was a solution. Where there was anger, there was also calm. Where there was a serious difference of opinion, there could be accommodation. His positive, optimistic attitude was his core, the arc of his being. Now, his positive nature may not have extended to when he was driving and cut off in traffic by somebody. We'll all talk about that. He also wasn't too fond when I informed him in my senior year in high school that tomorrow was senior skip day. Everybody was doing it. No, the optimistic part didn't come across then. There was no senior skip day. I am convinced, though, that his legacy does go beyond the accomplishments, of which there are so many, and goes to the example that he set for all of us, and the quote he used so often: wake up every day with something to do, something important to do. Be positive. Dr. George Valiant of Harvard ran a study that began in the late 1930s and followed a group of 800 people for their whole lives. John Kennedy was in it, as was Dad. Valiant and his team concluded that the key to happiness and satisfaction and great leaders is optimism and the ability to deal with adversity and disappointment. Turning lemons into lemonade, Valiant wrote. Our dad wasn't much of an athlete, so he turned to books and writing, especially about sports, from a very young age, and as a reporter. He couldn't fly in World War II because of his eyesight, so he managed and guided the planes from the ground in Italy. When he lost his first race for state representative in the early 1950s in a very Republican Lexington at that time, he ran again for the school committee and won. When our mother found it too difficult to manage 4 young kids, Dad took over and left the White House, a job he loved, just 2 months before JFK was killed. All through his life, he never looked back in anger or disappointment. He always looked forward. He looked to the future. He always woke up with something important to do. He engaged to the end with a mind that would never give in, but a body that finally gave out. He taught his Harvard classes by Zoom until 2 months before he died, and he discussed politics and the nation's history with insight and brilliance until the very end. His was a life that inspired and gave back and believed in the noble experiment that is America. He was a good and decent man, humble and wise, always positive, always waking up with something to do. He made a difference. May we all. Thank you.
My name is Ann Fenn. I'm one of Dan's daughters. And it is tough for us because words really cannot express the ocean of love, admiration, awe, and deep respect we all have for my dad and how he lived his giving, active, and full life. Any one of us family could spend days up here relaying stories and telling you about our dad, but I'm going to try to do my best in the time that I have here. Dad has always been a hero to me. We knew as kids growing up that we were incredibly lucky. But as I grew older, my pride and love grew in not only his accomplishments and activities, but in his incredibly generous, optimistic, determined, disciplined, remarkably kind, and loving nature. Our only problem was in our teens, there was not much to rebel against. Dad was the one who said no to the exclusive Kenwood Country Club in the early 60s in Washington, D.C. His family would not be joining their club because they did not allow Black or Jewish people to join. We would go to the public Glen Echo Park down the street. Dad was the one who was surprised at the Lexington police when I was brought home one night in high school after tying an armband on the Lexington Minuteman statue. I don't see a problem with that, he said. What do you think the Minuteman stands for anyway? Dad had courage and steadfast integrity. Once or often we are asked how Dad became involved with President Kennedy and the family campaigns. Growing up, Dad had watched his father, Reverend Dan Fenn, provide the opening and closing prayers at the Massachusetts State House. Thinking this all looked very exciting and fun, he later became involved with rejuvenating and building the Massachusetts Democratic State and Local Party. In the 50s, a group of Massachusetts politicos were sitting in a room trying to decide who they would support as their candidate for governor. They only had one viable candidate and time was limited. Everyone in the room had to unanimously agree for this candidate to move forward. They went around the table and all the men reluctantly agreed to support this candidate, except one. Dad said, "I'm really sorry, but no, we can do much better than this person." Back to the drawing board. Kenny O'Donnell, close friend and Kennedy operative, came up to Dad after that meeting and said, "You are the kind of person we want working with us." They were friends from then on, and he was pulled into exciting new challenges. Dad has been called a great man because of all he accomplished, all the students he encouraged to stay in government service, all the numerous state and local public and private initiatives he started and worked on every day. And I have to say that there were usually 3 to 5 meetings a day with Dad. And this is in his 90s. And he would then say, "Oh, you want to go out and have a drink with James Madison?" And we're like, "Dad, we're too tired. I don't think we can make it." Tom and I were often like, "Are you kidding? How does he do this?" I, honest to God, don't know anyone who did as much and said less about it. We did not know of all of his projects or even his honorary rewards until we were taking care of the house. He totally loved it all. He loved being in the arena, the variety of people and issues, making changes and improvements. Every new project, every new job was what could he do to make a difference. His devotion to service was total and unwavering. He never considered himself a star or a great man or even within the inner circle. He felt fortunate and lucky to have the opportunities he did. And he definitely was not fond of puffed up people who thought of themselves as special or better than others. No tolerance, here comes the driving again. No tolerance for even those drivers that would try to skirt 128 traffic by illegally flying by in the breakdown lane. One time, Dad would put his car between the regular lane and the breakdown lane so that people couldn't go around him and pass him. Well, he actually got a ticket for that. And he was trying to explain to the police that he was doing a good thing, trying to prevent all those people from not paying attention and trying to think they were super special and they got to go in the breakdown lane. They still gave him the ticket. It was not all work. He saw broad horizons and wanted to travel and explore and learn. He took his volunteer Earthwatch trips and sent grandchildren out to explore anywhere in the world they wanted to see. He studied the Bloomberg writers at Oxford, took a fantastic Italy-Spain family cruise, spent weeks in Italy, Ireland, traveled to China, Egypt, Africa, even rode on the Orient Express, and said everyone should see the magnificent Taj Mahal. We had so much fun sneaking in and climbing over a crumbling old Limerick castle wall, and with Dad chatting with his dingle cohorts. They would say, he comes here to Ireland and he teaches us how to tell a crack. Dad loved being with and traveling with Patsy Marshall, an old friend from the 50s who happily came back into his life in 2000 as his loving companion for 17 years. She became such a part of me, like breathing out and breathing in, he said. Dad enjoyed visiting Patsy in Connecticut, their excursions with mutual friends, his devoted nightly telephone conversations, and sharing her with all of us. And now the hard part. I feel Dad's greatest achievement was as a remarkably generous and loving dad and human being. He openly and wholeheartedly gave his intellect, his heart, his wit, his talents and skills, his precious time, and love to all of us and his many comrades, here and no longer here. When Senator Kennedy passed, we went to the JFK Library early one morning when the senator's casket was in the Steve Smith room. I thought that Dad was not going to make it as we passed the casket. I thought he was going to collapse. Tears were coming down his face. He came up to the casket. There were three people sitting in front of the casket who were there. People took turns sitting there, being there with the senator. My father walked up to the casket, stopped in front, and saluted. He was able to regain his composure, and then we walked out. Dad always remembered and cared for his comrades. He never missed a birthday party, confirmation, any graduation, or a child's grandchild victory or crisis. He was on the phone, visiting, taking us out to dinner, sending flowers always. Emily, one of Dad's granddaughters, said, "Grandpa knew more about my life than my best friend." When his first great-granddaughter was born and he was in the hospital, the little bouquet of flowers arrived. None of us would be who we are, where we are, without our dad, no question. For me, Dad was the one who carefully, patiently combed through my tangled curly hair before I went to school. He stayed up late editing my high school papers with me, took us on nature walks and history tours in Mount Vernon, Williamsburg, Gettysburg, and of course Monticello. Took us to Langdon School to see the spring azaleas. He initiated and relished our family celebrations, from George Washington's birthday skits to consistently sending me Valentine's Day roses after my divorce. Dad always endlessly listened. He never said, oh, I have to go to a meeting. Oh, I have to get this telephone call. Never. He calmly provided advice and help on career issues and boyfriends. We developed our EPA Superfund cases together, and he taught them freely at EPA headquarters, our EPA regions, and even Rockport, Mass. We went to art galleries, Cary Hall concerts, his Lexington Concord tours, his classes, drives to see spring flowers, and of course, our Saturday night Grassfields dinners. One night, this is a great story, I couldn't resist telling this story. One night, Dad came in, we all came into Grassfields restaurant, and we walk in, we all sit down, and Dad has a coat on. He slowly takes off his coat. And we, plus the people in the restaurant, take triple takes. He has put on, somebody gave him tattoo sleeves. And he put on both arms, his tattoo sleeves. And everybody in the restaurant went, what? This guy is clearly in his 90s. He walks in with a walker, and he's got tattoos on both his arms. Well, he thought this was hilarious, totally hilarious. And he wanted us even walking out of the restaurant. He said, okay, now I'm going to walk by the bar really slowly, okay? None of you guys make faces or anything. Don't burst out laughing, okay? We're going to see how this goes over. So he pulls up his sleeves and he walks right by the bar of this restaurant, and everybody at the restaurant bar, everybody goes, what? Like that. He thought, he just cracked up. He thought that had to be one of the most hilarious jokes. And he was constantly doing things like that. My father is my ever-loving dad, life guide, moral compass, counselor, teacher, mentor, strongest supporter, and constantly encouraging North Star. In the hospital this last time, I asked him, how are we going to manage Dad? He said, oh, I'll be around. And you will brave on, and you'll focus on Danielle, as you always have. Dad, I am sure you are here, and I hope you feel and know all of our love for you. Your life is that of a great man, but more importantly, a remarkably loving, great person and dad. You made your life an exciting ride, Dad, and it was so much fun to share it as your daughter. I love you always and forever, every day.
Wow. My grandmother had a saying, which my dad often repeated at celebrations and remembrances. He would say, "You really shouldn't have done it, but I'm awfully glad you did." Thank you all. Many of you might recognize this green jacket. It was my father's. It's been taken in just a little bit here and there, but its spirit remains. Not that green was his favorite color. That was blue. But the wearing of this jacket became so special and significant, and really first started from his beloved Star Island and banquet night regalia. It's bright, it's festive, truly reflective of his nurturing nature that he spread to all that knew him. It also stands out and conjures up his irreplaceable presence at key events, especially in recent years. It was so prominent in the weddings of my two oldest, Matthew and Aaron, at their weddings, and it also symbolizes his determination to be there, make a statement. Again, he always wanted to make his mark and be such a vital part of all those moments that were important to us and for him. It was, almost pointless, especially again in later years, to encourage him to rest and avoid stress and travel when there was a family event involved. Dad had a run-in with his doctor in February of 2011, and his doctor instructed him to go directly to Mount Auburn Hospital and check in with a cardiologist, who upon examination said, "We need to do a triple bypass within the next 48 hours. By the way, that same cardiologist said he would not perform this for any 87-year-old, but Dad was an exception, indeed. So fast forward that a little bit, not that fast, but I had a daughter that was graduating from college in a couple of months, and we encouraged Dad to, again, go through your therapy and relax, and he would hear nothing of it. Wasn't even up for discussion. He was there. Came down to Atlanta, and he was a big part of the celebration at that time. He would, however, he was in the custom of, he would traveling light these days in recent years. And his wardrobe, with the exception of this, I think, it had all those great garments that were a part of whether he was reading the Christmas Carol or in his wearing his Minuteman regalia and whatnot. But on the travel side, it was usually a little bit light. And, going back to my daughter's graduation, when he got down there, his little old blue little duffel bag that he had, and wasn't much in it. So I had to call Ann. I said, "Ann, this is it?" So I had to make a quick trip to Target to bone up on a few things that he needed at the time. It was also interesting when Ann brought out some course evaluations when he was teaching from a course down at the University of Virginia, and it was a terrific compilation of these reviews. One of those reviews was from a student who said that Professor Fenn was just remarkable, enlightening, and just so thoroughly enjoyed his storytelling and his presentation of the course. He did have one concern, and that was the compensation, because he wore the same clothes over and over and over. But it was important for him to be there for us. As Peter mentioned, he became a single father with 4 kids, some a little older, some a little younger. But again, it was so important for him to be there. He was there for whether it be a grandchild's wedding, standing up in mine, and being a parent, again, as a single parent, to act as a chaperone, to take some time off during the day in Washington, D.C. in 1965 to accompany my fourth grade class to go to the National Gallery of Art. Who does that in 1965? Dad did. When he was there, he was always prepared and diligent in his preparation. Watching him teach was a remarkable experience. Few people realize the extra work he did when preparing for a new group at the Kennedy School. He would spend the week studying the biographies of the 75 to 80 people that were in that cohort, and he would know each and every one of them by name, by their experience, and he would alter the teaching of, say, his Job Corps case to fit those students that were in his class. It was just remarkable. Each class was always different, and it was always tailored for that group. He taught, he nurtured, and the number of lives that he altered with his teaching is remarkable. I had a tremendous opportunity in Chicago about 15 years ago where he came to present, and there was a group from the Kennedy School that had arranged for a reunion. About 20 people were there. And from that crowd, I must have had about 5 people that approached me and told them how important Dad's teaching was to them and how he helped accelerate their careers, change their careers, and change the course of their lives. That was the kind of teacher he was. And the comments that we used to get, we still get from people like you out there, is how much he meant to them. And that one common thing that we always hear is, thank you for sharing your father. He shared so much, he taught us so much, and may we all continue to learn from him. Thanks for being here, Dad.
No, I am not Marie. You'll hear from her in a moment or two. Thank you, Ken. Is that good? Yep. Okay. Dad knew that humanity is at its best when people from different walks of life share the ability and the inclination. Oh, they couldn't hear? Okay.
Come on closer to the mic.
Okay. How's that? Okay. Dad knew that humanity is at its best when people from different walks of life share the ability and the inclination to recognize the things they have in common, as well as the differences between them. He understood that there must be a shared sense of kinship and community that, as within an orchestra or a parade, doesn't just tolerate differences, but is also able to value them, and is as mindful and as considerate of the differing circumstances, needs, and ambitions that sustain them. But he also had the empathy to understand that a one-for-all, all-for-one ethos is a hard sell when people are taught to believe that sense of we, of us, must be narrowly defined. That when the differences between us matter more than the things we have in common, our ability to see the good in others or the shared challenges and opportunities around us is diminished. That we are more likely to interpret words or behavior that we don't understand as evidence of foolishness or ill intent than an opportunity to learn more about the world. That we will be quicker to assume that when other people face misfortune, they must have brought it upon themselves, and to shirk accountability ourselves. Dad understood that, like a garden, the inherent good within us and the kinship between us must be cultivated. that the abstract concepts like principled conduct and admonitions to follow the golden rule gain validity with others only when we are seen to practice them ourselves. Dad did what he could do in word and deed, by himself when necessary and with others when possible, at home, at work, and in the community, to set a standard of conduct and a beacon of hope that would inspire the better natures of those who got to know him and make them more likely to take the high road too.
Wow. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to begin at the end in the hospital last August, saying goodbye to Dad when we both knew it was for the last time. I said, Dad, out of all the exogenous events that have happened in my life, you becoming my father was the very best. And he looked at me and he said, now that is a legacy. And what a legacy. I mean, we're all here because of that legacy, multidimensional, multi-layered, and so far-reaching. As I prepared for these remarks, I kept wondering, what was the secret sauce that made him so special? And for those of you who don't know, he made a secret sauce, which is a barbecue sauce that was one of his favorite things. And I found part of the answer to that question in a birthday card that I sent him years ago. I'm the one, I've lived overseas a lot, and we had a very lively exchange of letters over the years. And thanks, Tom, and you guys for sending this to me after he died. So I'm quoting from this card, birthday card. Dad, what I really cherish is you being you. In so doing, you have helped me to become who I am, and as time passes, who I shall become. You are an individual with the strength to support the individuality of others. That's an integral part of my foundation, and I thank you. 30 years later, I'm having a much more difficult time finding words, so I'm going to turn to a couple of memories and share them with you. On Father's Day, when I was 9 years old, I gave him a bone, which is what we called gift certificates, to take him to the horse races. I was beside myself with excitement. I was a totally pony crazy little girl. And he was too. He really was. I had about $4 or $5, and we made a day of it. We went to the races. We looked at all the horses. We decided, how should we bet? Is it the color of the horse? Is it what the jockey's wearing? Like, what do we do? And we experimented, and we tried, and we went crazy when the horses were running, and it didn't matter whether they won or lost. We just had so much fun. We bought 2 hot dogs. We did a bit more betting. It was, hot dogs with everything on top, of course. I knew there was no place in the world he would rather be, because there wasn't. When he was, as you heard from my brothers and sisters, when he was with us, he was with us, 100%. That's who he was. Spending time with those he loved, doing things that we cared about, he was with us 100%. The quality of that presence, now that's a legacy. When I look at my kids and I start to be distracted by whatever it might be, I think about him, and I come back. The legacy he gave us all. The second memory, I'll fast forward to last year, just a few months before he died. We were talking about teaching, which I'd recently started to do, and I told him that I got really nervous before I taught and spent way too much time preparing. He looked at me with those bright eyes full of warmth and said, "Of course you do. I always get nervous before I teach." And I was stunned. Really? The conversation continued, punctuated by his deep, thoughtful questions, and led me to 2 takeaways. 1, everyone gets nervous. If Dad gets nervous, then everyone gets nervous. And 2, don't let it stop you. And I didn't. And I come back to that and remember it every time I'm about to teach again. For 53 years and counting, I look at Dad and his legacy, and I'm inspired to step up, to step in, and to engage in this world in meaningful ways. From caring deeply for family and friends, as you've heard the stories, to pursuing one's passions and trying to make a difference in this world, to being playful, silly, and just having fun. He did it all and more. In closing, I'll return to where I started in the hospital as Dad was preparing to move on. He had told me that I'm done, and I was just sitting with him quietly throughout the afternoon. After a while, I had a moment of weakness, and I looked at him crying and said, "You know, Dad, I'm really going to miss you." And he smiled, that incredibly warm smile. And with total confidence, he said, "I'll be all around you," just like Ann said. Oh, how that brought me relief. And it still does. And I hope that it might do the same for you. How lucky we are that he's all around us. Thank you, Dad.
It's not. I want to do it right. Complicated. These are words from another son of Dan, Tom Fenn, another outstanding Lexington citizen who, with his wife Julie and their daughters, have enriched our town for many, many years. This is what Tom wrote for this occasion. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem starts with the words, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." And so begins the journey of a 12-year-old boy, born in Boston, raised in Taunton, Chestnut Hill, and Cambridge, Massachusetts. A young boy who read those words. You need to be right on the mic. Am I not? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I don't know what you missed, but he grew up all around the Boston area. And he heard about that poem. And he began his 97-year journey of interest, fascination, and exploration of our founding fathers, and of the formation of a new nation and government, resulting in his lifetime of active participation and contribution toward the great experiment. At that young age, our dad knew he wanted to be in Lexington, surrounded by her history, and now part of her story. After Brown and Nichols, Harvard, the U.S. Army Air Force, and World War II, he started his career at Harvard as one of the youngest assistant deans. He moved to Fair Oaks Drive in Lexington in 1949, started a family, and pursued his interests. He was the founding executive director of the Boston World Affairs Council, now World Boston, and then joined the faculty at the Harvard Business School. At the same time, he ran for state representative as a Democrat, which, as was mentioned earlier, in that time, this was a very Republican town. Though not winning, he was successful in his other town pursuits in the 1950s, including town meeting member, Capital Expenditures Committee, Lexington School Committee, Democratic Town Committee, Democratic State Convention, and as an alternate delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1960. Living in Lexington till 1961, he moved a family of 4 children to Washington, D.C., only to return to Lexington in 1969 with a family of 7 children. Other than gathering 3 more children while in Washington, he worked as staff assistant to President Kennedy, vice chairman of the U.S. Tariff Commission, and president of the Center for Business and Government Relations with Daniel Yankelevich. But my dad loved Lexington and this church, the first meeting house where town meetings were born and tested out, where people, neighbors and friends came together to discuss, explore, and generate ideas and plans. Solving problems, resolving disputes, and making life better for the town's inhabitants. My dad loved to be involved and to participate, whether at a Potter Pond trustee meeting or a White House appointment for an ambassadorship. He had the ability to retain information, assess a situation, stimulate constructive discussion of ideas and options, review and comment, and recommend a strategy for resolution. He was proud of his work as a selectman, president of the Lexington Historical Society, founding chair of the Lexington Education Foundation, the Fund for Lexington, LexFest Committee, Council on Aging, Cary Library trustees, but most important to him, a proud member of the Lexington Minutemen Company. Just reading this list, Tom, is unbelievable. I mean, most of us here may have done one or two of these things. Okay, how about all of them? Longfellow's poem continues. You know the rest. In the books you've read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again. This past long year, I feel my dad's presence as I continue to walk through town, feeling lonely, but proud of all he has done. While in hospital, during those final days, as he was slowly slipping away, I told him I loved standing with him on all those early, cool April mornings and marching with him in parades through town. And he said, "Don't worry, we will march again. We will march again."
Will you join with me in prayer? O infinite Spirit of life and love, we have been granted such a gift in the life of Dan Fenn. We are grateful beyond measure for him, for the lessons he taught us all, and for the inspiration he planted in our hearts. Help us to live with the open-hearted intelligence and love which anchored his life. Help us to find his spark of resilience, that we might discover gratitude in the midst of trouble and beauty in the midst of adversity. We give thanks for the light of love that persists through death and lives in human hearts. We give thanks for this gathering of friends as we celebrate the past, walk together in the present, and rely on each other in the days to come. May the Spirit of love surround us as we travel on. Amen. And please join me in the words which Jesus taught, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Unitarian Universalist hymn we're about to see was one of Dan's favorites. Anchored in the words of Isaiah and Amos, it expresses his hope that together we will create a land of peace and justice. So please rise as you are able and join in singing, We'll Build a Land.
Where we bind up the broken, we'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness resolves the mourning. Oh, we'll build a land of big can be. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and deeds like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come build a land, my people we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, can then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
And now may the Spirit that was in Jesus be in us also, enabling us to know the truth, to do the will of God, and to abide in his peace. Please remain standing.
Oh.